In the wake of what many are now calling one of the most explosive and significant moments in recent congressional history, Jasmine Crockett's televised confrontation with Mitch McConnell has sent ripples far beyond the Capitol. What began as a simple oversight hearing transformed into a transformative episode that pierced through the often sterile atmosphere of Washington politics. This wasn't just about Crockett disagreeing with McConnell, it was about shining a light on the contradictions, evasions, and institutional stagnancy that have defined McConnell's long career in the Senate. As Crockett spoke, you could feel something shifting, not just in the room, but across a country fatigued by partisan theatrics and desperate for someone to say out loud what so many have felt for years. Crockett, a freshman congresswoman with a background in civil rights law and public defense, entered the chamber fully prepared. She knew McConnell's record better than most, and unlike others who may have softened their tone in deference to his tenure, Crockett treated him like any other public servant whose actions demanded accountability. She had the receipts, quotes, statistics, Senate records, and she used them methodically. But it wasn't just the facts that made the moment so unforgettable. It was her tone, her composure, her refusal to blink in the face of one of Washington's most entrenched figures. She spoke not as someone making a political argument, but as someone advocating for millions of Americans left behind by decades of political gamesmanship. Her voice grew firmer as she laid bare the hypocrisy of McConnell's legislative history. She cited the dozens of bipartisan bills stalled at his desk, legislation that had passed the House with wide support but was allowed to wither in the Senate. When McConnell recently called the Democratic platform a fantasy of social engineering, Crockett didn't miss a beat. What's more fantastical? She asked sharply. Wanting families to have clean drinking water and access to doctors, or pretending trickle-down economics ever helped the working class? The silence that followed wasn't just from the audience, it was from McConnell himself, whose usually rehearsed responses seemed to evaporate in real time. And then she went even further. She referenced the COVID-19 pandemic and how stimulus negotiations had been dragged out under McConnell's leadership. When people were dying, when small businesses were shuttering forever, you played political chess. You thought delaying relief would make Democrats look bad. It didn't. It just showed how little urgency you felt for the people you swore to represent. The words hit like a hammer. They weren't just criticisms, they were indictments. Rooted in undeniable reality, people remembered those months of chaos. And now, they were seeing the architect of that delay being confronted with brutal honesty. In real time, social media began exploding. Clips of her remarks were posted, shared, reshared, captioned, and remixed. The hashtags were endless, hashtag Crockett Unleashed, hashtag MC Connell Exposed, hashtag Truth in Congress. Twitter pundits who normally dismissed Crockett as too new to matter were suddenly rewriting their analyses. Major news outlets interrupted their programming to broadcast the footage. Even conservative channels, which usually avoided airing full critiques of Republican leadership, couldn't ignore the virality of the moment. It was too powerful, too sharp, too perfectly emblematic of a growing sentiment in America, that the old guard's time may finally be running out. And what made Crockett's takedown so effective wasn't simply that it was emotional, it was intellectual. She didn't just speak in sweeping generalities. She quoted the CBO's economic analyses, dug into tax legislation, cited the procedural loopholes McConnell had mastered to block hearings and judicial confirmations. She even read aloud from McConnell's own book, turning his words against him. You once said, "Power is the most transient possession in Washington." You knew it then, Senator. But somewhere along the way, you started acting like power was your birthright. That line drew gasps, even from members of her own party. McConnell sat motionless. His staff exchanged nervous glances, uncertain whether to respond or let the moment pass. But Crockett wasn't finished. She brought up voting rights, how McConnell had called the John Lewis Voting Rights Act unnecessary, despite overwhelming evidence of disenfranchisement across the country. You can't honor a man with words and kill his legacy with your votes, she said. That's not leadership. That's betrayal wrapped in civility. As the minutes ticked by, it became clear this wasn't just another congressional exchange. This was a political reckoning. Crockett held nothing back. She addressed McConnell's silence on white nationalist rhetoric, on mass shootings, on systemic racism. You pick and choose your outrage, she said. When Wall Street cries, you rush to wipe their tears. But when black communities scream for justice, Your response is, let's wait and see. That's not neutrality, that's complicity. The tension in the room reached a boiling point when Crockett raised the subject of judicial manipulation. She referenced the blocking of Merrick Garland in 2016 and the hasty confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett in 2020. You changed the rules when it suited you. And when we challenge that, you cry about norms. The only norm you follow is whatever protects your party's grip on power. Some Republicans in the room could no longer hide their discomfort. A few, notably younger members, turned their eyes away, clearly troubled by the sharp but truthful critique being leveled at the face of their party. McConnell eventually tried to respond, his voice calm but strained. He spoke of process, of constitutional roles, of long-standing Senate traditions. But Crockett wasn't having it. Tradition without integrity is just an excuse for cowardice, she said. The Constitution doesn't demand an action. It doesn't require silence in the face of suffering. It demands responsibility. And frankly, Senator, you've been dodging that for years. Those words landed like a blow to the gut of the establishment. The room went still. Cameras captured McConnell blinking slowly, mouth slightly open, as if unable to process the full scope of what had just unfolded. His decades of navigating Washington's waters with careful ambiguity had suddenly met a force that didn't flinch, didn't hedge, and most importantly, didn't care about the usual rules of deference. Outside the chamber, journalists gathered like bees to honey. Headlines were already being written. Editorial boards raced to publish instant reactions. Crockett dismantles Senate stalwart. A new voice shakes the old guard. McConnell meets his match. The story transcended party lines. Some conservative outlets dismissed her words as grandstanding, but others quietly admitted the takedown had landed harder than anyone expected. A few even called it necessary, acknowledging the growing frustration among GOP voters who felt increasingly disconnected from McConnell's cold, calculated brand of politics. Over the next 24 hours, Crockett's approval ratings spiked. Donations to her re-election campaign surged. Liberal think tanks and progressive organizations rallied behind her. But so did independents and centrists who saw in her a rare authenticity missing from much of the political scene. She had done something few dared. She confronted power. Not for spectacle, but for substance. She didn't just speak to the moment. She exposed the decades that led to it. And for McConnell, the fallout was just beginning. Conservative commentators questioned whether he still had the political instincts to lead in a rapidly evolving landscape. His own party members began distancing themselves subtly, signaling fatigue with the slow, procedural leadership style that once made him an immovable force in Washington. Even some of his longtime allies conceded that Crockett had raised valid criticisms that the party needed to address if it wanted to remain relevant in the future. Meanwhile, Crockett returned to work as if nothing had happened. No victory laps. No self-congratulatory interviews. When asked by reporters if she felt vindicated, she replied simply, "I did my job. That's all." It was a short answer, but it spoke volumes. Crockett wasn't in Congress for clout. She was there to confront injustice, to call out complacency, and to elevate voices drowned out by bureaucracy. And in that hearing, she did exactly that. Political historians have already begun dissecting the moment. Some say it will be remembered as a generational shift, the beginning of a new era where younger lawmakers no longer defer to titles or tenure. Others believe it marks a deeper public demand for unfiltered honesty in politics. Whatever the case, one thing is certain: Jasmine Crockett changed the game. She reminded everyone watching, both inside and outside of government, that the people are always watching, always listening, and always hungry for truth. So, as we move forward into an uncertain political future, one thing is clear: there's no more room for passive leadership. No more space for those who hide behind the weight of their titles while ignoring the people who gave them that power. Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak truth to power, she exploded it. And in doing so, she gave America a glimpse of what accountable, fearless leadership really looks like. If you found this moment as unforgettable and necessary as we did, make sure to hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel for more unfiltered political breakdowns. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment where the truth cuts through the noise. Jasmine Crockett didn't come to play, she came to lead. And the world is finally paying attention.